Success is not measured by how how much there is for you to show. I've really learned, especially living in LA, where it's a very, very competitive and tough industry to be in, that it's knowing how much you put yourself out there. When you've done all of that, then looking at, okay, well, what else can I do? How else can I, be a creative or get involved or do something that's going to fulfill me? I think you need to just be able to you need to fill your cup. And so whatever way your cup is being filled that allows you to say like, hey, I'm doing something or I'm working towards something, I think is where success can be measured.
Welcome to another episode of the Starter Girlz podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Loehding, and wherever you are tuning in today, we are so glad to have you. So I'm going to open up with this today. Some people tell stories through words, others through movement, and some through the very essence of who they are. My guest today has spent years exploring both the art of performance and the thrill of pushing her own limits on stage, on screen, and even upside down. And I am so excited to chat with her today. This is going to be such a fun call. But before I welcome her on, I do want to do a quick shout out to our sponsor.
This episode is brought to you by Walt Mills Productions. Need to add excitement to your YouTube videos or some expert hands for editing? Look no further. Walt Mills is the solution you've been searching for. Walt is not only your go-to guy for spicing up content, he's the force behind a thriving film production company with numerous titles in the pipeline. Always on the lookout for raw talent, Walt is eager to collaborate on film and internet productions. With a background deeply rooted in entertainment and promotion, Walt Mills leverages years of skills to give you the spotlight you deserve. Want to learn more about Walt and his work? Head on over to waltmillsproductions.net and let your content shine.
All right. And with that, we do want to make a mention to head on over to startergirlz.com. I say this every single week. And why? One, because it's a great place. If you have missed an episode, you can catch up. You can sign up for our community newsletter, stay in the know. And then, of course, you'll be able to keep up with what's going on. And most important of all, you can take our 2-minute quiz over there. If you are an aspiring entrepreneur, creator, maybe you're in the thick of it and you want to know what your number one success block is, well, that's what that's for. So as I always say, head on over to startergirlz.com and do your thing. All right. So my guest today, Anabelle Ciancuillo, an LA-based actor and producer whose work spans the stage, screen, and even innovative media campaigns. She's originally from Chicago. She honed her craft at prestigious theaters like Steep Theater and Shattered Globe Theater, bringing authenticity and nuance to every role. On screen, she's known for captivating performances in the short film Trending, Don't Call Me Sweetheart Show, and The Veil. Beyond acting, Annabelle serves as the West Coast spokesperson for Switch, an innovative electric bike conversion kit, showcasing her dynamic presence to audience across the USA as a child of deaf adults. She brings a unique perspective to storytelling, infusing every project with depth and authenticity. So I am so excited to chat with you, Annabelle. I'm like, you got so much great things going on, but I just want to tell you, welcome to the Starter Girlz show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure
This
to
is
be
going to
here.
this is going to be so much fun. Like, I know there's more because I was looking at your bio and you do this Muay Thai, you do all these fun things that you've got going on in your world. So I love the diversity and, I guess maybe in just like the freedom of expression, you get to do this in just various forms in your world. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
All right. So let's open this thing up. I want to talk about your personal journey. I want to start with this. So let's do this. How did you first discover your love for performance and what brought you from Chicago to LA?
First started performing when I was really young. And when the town that I grew up in, they did this for the 5th through 8th grade middle school. They did something called like the Glencoe Junior High Project. And they would bring in a really high level director, choreographer that would run the play program, the musical theater program. And when you're in 6th grade is the first year you can do it. When you're in 6th grade, you can finally join. And that year was Annie. My sister had been in one. My brother had been in one. When I would go and watch them when I was younger, I was enamored. And so by the time I got to 6th grade, I was like, "Oh my God, I have to do this show. I've got to be in it." And I fell in love with the process. I 6th grade was a really, like any middle school teenager, sorry, you might hear my cat who will make an
That's
appearance.
all right.
Um, going through, a rough time. I was bullied a lot in 6th grade. And the one that was a really amazing escape and where bullying didn't exist was the theater. Everyone was accepted, everyone, you were an ensemble. And so it really became home. It really became a safe haven for me. And that's where I would go to after school. And so I really fell in love with the process and fell in love with immersing myself into the theater. I mean, I was one of those kids that was like obsessed with I learned everyone's lines, I learned everyone's dance. By the time I was in 8th grade and I had worked with this director for 3 years in a row, I like remember there was one time where no one knew the song. And he turns and he's like, "Where's Annabelle?" He's like, "What are the song lyrics?" And here I am like, "There's no writing on the lockers. There's no," and I'm able to recall all the lyrics and everyone's like, "Okay, like way to show us off." And it was just one of those things though that I just was so in love with it. It was just what I wanted to do. I just thought it was so cool to be able to step into another character's shoes and be able to like portray this story. So that's really where my love for theater grew and for acting and performance grew. I think at 6th grade was when I said to myself, "This is what I want to do for the rest of my life." And people are like, "Oh, that's a young age to know." And have said, "No, really, that is 6 when I was like, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life."
Yeah.
And because of that, then, I told my mom and that's when by the time I was, 13, 14, 15, I started taking acting classes. And then that led into on-camera classes. And on-camera classes opened a whole new world of, oh, I don't have to be this big. I can, take all this energy, you know, cram it into being focused on a screen that's this big. And so I was really fascinated with that craft because that was really challenging for me. I was a very extroverted kid and very loud and so taking something and fine tuning it for camera was a way to then challenge me even further in the craft. Eventually I moved to LA because COVID made you realize that Chicago's really cold. Um, and I had kind of done the Chicago thing. I had been there for a while and I just needed to shake things up. I went to college in Chicago as well. And I think for me, I wanted to get out of the city that I went to college in and really kind of shake up my bones and kind of shock my nervous system with something so new to be able to like throw myself into the world of performance and kind of be in a city where everyone was doing that.
Yeah.
So that's why I moved.
Yeah. It sounds like I mean, you mentioned your sister and your brother are they still pursuing acting as well? Or was this just sort of something the short lived for them? And it sounds like for you, it took hold for real.
Um, my sister does not perform anymore, although she's a phenomenal singer and she does sing as a hobby. My brother, he's actually on the other side of the industry.
Okay.
And so he works he's a producer and a manager and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Um, yeah, so art's kind of lives within the family, but we kind
Yeah,
of
it
took
sounds like it.
our own
I love
route.
it. No, and I think it's great because I'm a creative person. And it's funny because I never acting was never my thing. But I laugh now because I've told this story so many times. I'm a early 70s child. And back then, obviously, we didn't have podcasts and internet and all that stuff. But I remember as a child getting my cassette player and recording myself having like being on the radio, like talking about things, right? But I don't know that I
Oh
ever
yeah.
thought that I would do anything with that. And I find it so funny because this is not my podcast is not my main work, but this is what everybody thinks is the only thing I do because that's what they know me for here is like, I'm the Starter Girls podcast. That's what I do, because they'll be like, what do you do for work? I'm like, I got a whole nother side gig, but I love this because I think creativity is so important in our lives. And I think so many people they don't, one, pursue anything in the creative, and they just don't feel like they have the opportunity. And I think it's so great when you can find a way to express yourself in some kind of creative form, whatever that be.
Yeah, I think, it's super interesting to say that because back in the day in middle school, in high school, in college, the creativity was the hobby. It was
Yeah,
something that I went to as an escape from the everyday work of school, of
right,
academia. And that was where I allowed myself the freedom to be really creative. Well, now the creative and the acting and everything is the job. And so
yeah,
there was a alignment of how do I continue to love, the hobby when it's now the job, which I
right,
think a lot of people struggle with, or why people do it for a short period of time and then move away from it because they, determine that it's not for them, that that's not where they want to put their eggs in a basket of pursuing it as a job because it loses the enamor of it being fun and having a hobby as it.
yeah,
And so I think that's ultimately why I had to find other creative outlets to fuel creativity so that when I do get a job and when I am working on it or I'm in a show, still is fulfilling that creativity. But before that, it's all work,
right,
the business side. But in
yeah,
order to fulfill my creativity self when I'm not working, that's why I do all these kind of really unconventional sports like
yes,
aerial and Muay Thai. I'm learning how to surf. Uh,
love it.
anything that can kind of because to me, I've got to live in my body kind of person.
Mhm. Yeah,
Most creators, in some way, shape, or form, I think are body individuals. We either need to use our hands or our full body or our voice, or whatever it may be. And so, if I'm not doing something that allows me to express myself fully, I think I would go a little crazy.
yeah, no, I get it. I get it, absolutely. So, so you've worked across theater, films, you've done, commercial, all these different things, producing. So I would love to know, how do you approach a project? Are you all on hands on organized? I mean, what does this look like for you when you take on a project? Is it
Oh man, everyone is so different.
Yeah.
Um, it's funny because I am definitely someone that is I do really well under pressure.
Okay.
So
I do
some things
too.
get some things
Yeah.
get kind of pushed for me. If I sit and start memorizing lines right away, it doesn't do anything for me.
Gotcha.
So what I've learned is I have to go into the character building, and the lines are the last thing that I memorize because
Okay.
I'm very quick to memorize lines, and especially if I'm under pressure, I will memorize lines within an hour. And so that's been my one superpower ever since I was a kid. I just have a really good memory and I can memorize lines quickly. But if I don't do the prep beforehand, then I do myself a disservice. So really I try to figure out who is this person? Who is the character that I'm playing? What's their morning routine? And how does their morning differ from my morning routine? And figuring out, steps in that direction. I'm currently in a film right now that's in production, a
Awesome.
feature film for a Christmas film. And my character is a journalist. When working on my character, I was like, okay, what time does my character wake up? What what is my morning routine? Like, am I a coffee drinker? Am I a tea drinker? And I really kind of like separate myself and my character self of trying to figure out like how we differ so that I can really play it authentically. And then that I think once you have a idea of what your scenes are, who your character is, the lines come really naturally. It makes it easier to memorize. So that's kind of how I approach my productions, but every time it's different. It also
Right.
depends on what the production timeline is,
Yeah.
and how much I'm working on. If I'm just an actor on it, that's a different, scenario. If I'm acting and producing something,
Right.
then there's a little more, you know, I think there's a little more, I don't wanna say care, not the right, but there's a little more you're involved in it just more.
Yeah. Right. I get it. No,
It,
and
it,
I and
beco-
I
it
the reason
becomes
I'm
like a
nodding.
baby.
Yeah, and the
'Cause
reason
you're
I'm
like,
nodding with you because I feel like it's the same way when I'm doing a podcast show. I feel like it's the same kind of thing. It's obviously different when I'm doing this in versus going on, but also prepping beforehand when I get to know who the guests are before we get on the show. Because if I were just to sit down and start reading the questions and I look at your bio 5 minutes before you come on, I don't know who you are as a person. Like I have no idea yet who this individual is. So like yesterday before you came on, I was already into your stuff. I already looked you up online. I was already researching you. I wanted to know what you sounded like, your voice, all those things, because I think it's no different. It's that prep, right? It's that taking the
yeah,
time. I love that you said this because I think it's really that's where the authenticity is coming in. You're putting yourself in the shoes of this person to create this character rather than going, okay, I got to memorize the line. Now I got to figure out the character. I could totally, I'm not even an actor, but I could totally see how you're doing this because I think that's how I would probably do it too.
yeah. Because you've got to. I think for me, I have to take it slow, right? I have to try to relate it in terms of if I'm stepping into a character, it's me, Annabelle, playing a character. So there's an
Right.
element of me that's going to exist in every character that I play, right?
True.
So
Yes.
I'd be doing a disservice if I don't figure out how I would function as this character, how I would embody this character. And that goes, I mean, that's why us actors, we're doing these like weird movement things because we're like trying to like, oh, does she sit up really nice or is she a huncher? Like, we try to figure out where it lives in our body. And if I'm thinking about, my character Nicole, if I'm like, oh, I'm someone who like maybe slouches a little bit, I'm like, Nicole she's ready to go. She's uptight and, you know, fierce and ready to come into the world at 5 a.m. with a cup of coffee and she's business go, 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 go. And so, and there are times when I'm like, oh yeah, I know when I've been like that. So I'm able to kind of tap into that or like, I know what that feels like. I know where that lives in my body and how do I engage with that feeling so that I can bring authenticity to the role. And then let's put
Yeah.
the lines in so that I'm saying, this other person's lines.
Right.
I think I think for me, a lot of that comes from a little bit of like Meisner technique of just training that I've had. I went to a studio back in the day in Chicago that I trained at, where when we say our lines, every line format and the way that the line is written had a way that you would walk the line out.
Mm,
So
I like it.
So you would stomp on each word that you were saying, but the punctuation at the end of the line determined what you would do. So if it was like an ellipses, I think you would go like, like, so it would
Great.
be like your
Yeah.
body was like
Right.
cheering on. And then if it was like a period mark, you would like stomp your foot. It was like the end of a, so there were like things that we ingrained of like how to memorize lines or how to get the lines in our body. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that has really evolved into me coming into this situation of, okay, I gotta get this character in my body and then allow the lines to fuel this
Yeah.
character.
I love it. I would have loved to learn that back when I was taking history in college. Because, I used to do stuff like that. I still do things like that. Like I make up whenever I have to memorize things, I'll make up like songs to memorize things or like things in my head that I can be like an alliteration or something that I can put together to remember things. But
I do
I
that
used to do
all
stuff
through
like, yeah, I think
yes.
our brains are just wired like this. Like I need that whole, like that stomping thing would have been so great. Like you remember, stop, do a different pattern. But it's whatever I think whatever way that, it helps you get through that memorization and that learning process, right? And like you mentioned early on, moving our bodies, whatever that is, I think as a creative person, we tend to do things like that. I'm not saying that, no, I think all of us have a little bit of creativity. I just think some of us use it more than others. And I think our brains just kind of gravitate to those kinds of things. And so I love this. I think it's great. Whatever strategy to me, it's kind of like a holistic approach in my mind, because you're getting, you're not just walking into something and going, okay, I got to memorize the lines of this role. It's like, no, I'm embodying this, and I think it's funny too when you talk about like characters, because right now as you're talking, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking of Jason Bateman, like all the roles that he always gets. Like I loved him in Ozark. It's like I used to watch him when he was in the sitcom when we were in the 80s. I mean, like I have followed him along, and it's funny how he'll do, like there was a movie he was on recently where he was like the bad guy in this movie, and I was
Oh,
like,
the
oh
airplane, right? Or
yes,
the
it was
the
one of those.
airplane one,
Yes, and
yeah.
I'm like, it's so out of character. He is like, if you know the DISC and the Meyer Briggs, he's like the C personality character, the detailed, the stay, and then they put him in that role. And I'm like, you're messing me up. You're just messing me up with the roles, because I think we do. When you said, there's a little part of me that always comes through. So I'm guessing, have you had at this point in any roles that have just been like really different from who you are character wise?
I mean, that's a good question. Yeah, there have been characters that are really different. Um, I back in college, I think I played like a drug addict who overdosed. Um,
Wow. Yeah.
and that was really different. That was
Yeah.
not
Right,
anything,
obviously,
but
right?
but
Yeah.
I think when, preparing for something like that, it comes down to, you think about addiction and, addiction is
Yeah.
obsession or hyperfixation on something. And I think I latched on to, okay, like for me in adapting how I get into this character, what is what's something I've hyperfixated on or what's something
Mhm.
I've had an obsession with? Or like first love is always a good one of like when you lose a first love
Yeah.
and that heartbreak, how that feels sometimes can be so detrimental and you want to get it back or you want to fix it. It's kind of
Right.
like that rush or that need. And so I kept trying to find things that related in my life so that I could give as close to a, performance for someone that would be a drug addict to that. Because yeah, I've never done drugs to
Right.
know what that would
You're not
be.
gonna obviously do that to
Right,
try to see what
right.
that's like. No, but I could totally
Yeah.
I can tell that, by listening to you, I can tell you're dedicated to what you're doing and really getting into there and trying to define what that looks like. And I think that's awesome, because you're not taking this lightly, and I can hear it in your languaging and what you're saying. I'm picking up on. I love it, because I think it's not a fleeting thing. It's something you're definitely passionate about what you're doing, and I think it's awesome. So it's a cool thing.
Like, and, there's imagination. Like, I
Yeah,
think the biggest part of it is there is an element of imagination, and every
right.
actor is different. Some actors
Sure.
really rely on their imagination. Some actors rely on real life experience and personal experience, and I think that are somewhere in between the two. I don't think there's any one which way that's right
Right.
for any circumstance. It
Sure.
really we're actors with a toolbox, and every project is figuring out which tool is going to work. And
Right.
sometimes you need a wrench and a screwdriver. Um,
Right.
so
Yeah. Isn't
it's
that life? Isn't that how life is no matter what you do? Like,
right,
right? Right.
it's not always one size fits all. And so I
Right.
think that, as much as we can, try to relate things, there is an element and a certain point I think that to where we have to go, okay, I have to like do my research and then I just have to imagine this. I just have to imagine and have empathy for this character and put myself into these shoes and imagine the circumstances and what that would be like.
Yeah.
It's,
It's great.
hopefully
No.
that gets you there.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. Well, and with such a diverse career, I would love to know like how you, because, and I feel like you kind of embodied this already. I'm feeling like I'm hearing this from you. So I feel like I could define this kind of, but I want to hear from you like how you define success for yourself and in your work and what you do.
I think success is not measured by how how much there is for you to show. I
Right.
think that I've really learned, especially living in LA, where it's a very, very competitive and tough industry to be in, that it's knowing how much you put yourself out there.
Yeah.
It's crossing all your T's and dotting your I's and making sure that you're doing your part in the business side. And when you've done all of that, then looking at, okay, well, what else can I do? How else can I, be a creative or get involved or do something that's going to fulfill me? Because I think you need to just be able to you need to fill your cup. And so whatever way your cup is being filled that allows you to say like, hey, I'm doing something or I'm working towards something, I
Yeah.
think is where success can be measured. But if you're just sitting and waiting for things to happen, I think that's when, laziness gets in where people start to feel unsuccessful, where I start to feel unsuccessful. And so for me, I think I measure my success on how much I'm putting myself out there, the connections that I'm making, and how I'm changing as an actor, what I'm doing to improve myself as an actor, and how my work is changing and putting it on tape, whether that's a self tape or I'm creating, small video clips with friends and doing, shorts or kind of real types of things or bigger projects. But having the same way for work for nutrition, the way that people tell you to take a photo, progress photos, every week or every month or whatever to track your improvement is the same for acting. If you don't put yourself on tape, if you don't have recordings of yourself where you can see, oh, I'm learning this and this is getting better or I'm tapping into this quicker, then how are we supposed to know and measure our success? Because if we're not
Right.
working towards something that is measurable, we have no beach.
Yeah, no, and you said something powerful there because I think that really transcends to anything, right? You said weight loss; it transcends to anything where we're trying to achieve it's something and measuring our progress, right? To see how we're growing and evolving at time. And I go so far even to say that, because if we're not continually evolving, we're stalling, right? And you kind of said that we're not going anywhere. If you're not continuing to work on your craft or whatever it is that you're passionate about, whether it's yourself. And I think you're doing that already. I don't know that we always say we're evolving, you're evolving in your craft as an artist, but you're also evolving as a human being going through that process, right? And I think
Right.
that's really what life is about. It just so happens that you get to do that creatively, which I think is a blessing because
Yeah.
I think, like I said early on, a lot of people miss that. They don't get that opportunity to do that. So I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's important. And because acting is such a hard thing to measure, especially when
yeah,
you're not always booking or you're not always on a show, in
right.
order for you to feel successful in your craft is to keep working and
Yeah,
whether it's taking a class or doing your own work, just keep working and be able to measure your own success so that no one else is telling you how great you are. You get it from yourself.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And you have deaf parents. Am I correct? Did we get that right? Do you feel like some of this has had impact in some of the work that you're doing today?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, I think I'm much more mindful of people and where they come from and their surroundings or what their level of education or abilities are in general, especially with, deaf parents. We had to grow up really quickly. We were interpreting a lot for
Yeah,
our mom and dad growing up. And so you kind of had to be an adult as a kid. And so you
right.
learn really quickly on how to communicate and just take in
Yep,
information and give information because we were relied on for that at times.
right. Yeah,
So, yeah, I think it's definitely shaped me in terms of being understanding. I think it's also allowed me to have a lot of empathy. And that's why then having empathy for a character is really helpful because I'm then able to kind of be like, okay, I need it. Even when you're playing an awful character,
yeah,
you've got to be able to
right.
have empathy for that character. Why are they like this?
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, it's definitely helped shape me in
That's
that
awesome.
realm.
Yeah, I dated a guy. I'm in my 50s now soon, but back when I was in my 20s, I dated a guy that actually had parents that were deaf and he was an interpreter. And yeah, and it was a very interesting, I think we only dated for like about a year, but I was around him. All of the siblings, he had two sisters and himself. They all could, speak and hear and everything, but both his parents were deaf. And I just remember being there and it was so interesting because it was just so quiet. Like I grew up in a house, everybody was noisy. I'd go over there, it'd be so quiet in there. And so I got to kind of see how they operated and did that. So I think it's impressive. And I do think it, I asked that question kind of rhetorically because I assumed that it did, because I know anytime you grow up in places, especially if you've had to, grow up very quickly, you learn to adapt, you learn some great survival skills. Some of those, a lot of those transfer into the work that we do. And I think they become kind of super strengths for us. I love these stories where people have taken situations and been able to excel in their areas despite, things that have always been perfect. So maybe one thing I want to ask you before we get ready, I got a couple fun questions I want to ask you, but I got one more important one I want to ask. Like, what advice would you give for maybe somebody right now who is, you said a lot of great things in here, but maybe we'll sum this up, a little bit of advice for anybody that wants to maybe go into maybe acting or anything, producing in the creative aspect. Maybe they want to start something. What would you say to them?
Do it. Uh, lead with fear. Fear is the one thing that's going to hold you back, and
Yeah.
you'll never know what's on the other side if you don't do it. So, challenge fear, take classes, meet people, and connect in a community where people are also wanting to do that. I went to Sundance for the first time this year, and I absolutely loved it because I really was just into the networking and meeting other creatives and
Yeah.
just seeing and hearing what everyone was doing. That was really enjoyable for me. Um, yeah, I think anyone that's serious about doing it, it's one thing to say it, it's another thing to do it. And
Yeah.
if you're going to just say it and allow fear to hold you back, then it's probably not the industry for you. But if you have the will to kind of push through and to say, you know what, I'm going to stare fear in the eyes because fear is, you know,
Yeah.
just a feeling.
Right.
Sitting in the dark is is scary if you're afraid of the dark. But once you sit in the
Right.
dark, you realize it's not that scary.
Yeah.
Um, so you just got to go through it because you might
I
come
would
out on the
agree.
other side realizing it wasn't that scary.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. It's all relative. It's all perception, right? I'm in this program right now where I'm actually doing it's like a 7-week thing and it's all on saboteurs. And we were talking about like judgment, like how we have perceived judgments about things and people. And we just make these ideas in our head. And I mean, I've studied this before, so I kind of knew this, but we all know it's like we get these ideas about something and then they just become fact, right? Like you just said, sitting in the dark can be fearful. If you do it, after a while, it's not scary any longer, right? So I agree with all your points on that one. So,
Yeah.
all right, couple fun questions I want to ask you. These are always fun. So what's a fun or this? I'm reading this here. What is a fun or unexpected skill you picked up that most people might not guess about you? Something that you maybe somebody doesn't, they don't know that you do, or you can.
I
We know
mean,
you
definitely my
asked.
aerial.
I think that's
Definitely the
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah,
tell us
definitely
about
my
that real
aerial.
quick. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I went to an aerial show that was like a dinner circus show, and I was watching all these performers, and I was like, "Oh, this is like another great way to like be able to act and perform. I should learn how to do this." And
Yeah.
then I ended up dating a guy in that show for a little bit, and so I kind of just fell into the circus world because of him, and really just I have never performed, and it's the one joke in my aerial studio that everyone's like, "Annabelle, why won't you perform?" And I'm always like, "I'm not at the level where I feel comfortable to perform at." But it is something I really have enjoyed doing as a hobby and creating in and learning. So that's kind of how I got into it.
I love it. I think it's awesome. Yeah. This is maybe a fun question I want to ask you. Who would you say, like, out of, I guess, obviously you're in the acting world. So maybe an actor or two that you feel like maybe just has inspired you or that you really admire for their craft? Anybody in particular?
You know, I've really been appreciative of Timothy Chalamet right now. I think he's doing some really great work.
Awesome.
I also really enjoyed Jennifer Lawrence's performance in the movie that she did with Robert Pattinson recently. That I'm blanking on, Something Darling. But it was
Yeah,
like a
I know what you're
master class on movement. I mean, she really embodied and did something that we don't always see, and I, like, absolutely loved that performance of
Yeah.
hers. So I think it changes all the time,
Sure.
Meryl Streep is always, like, the GOAT,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
and then Robert Downey Jr. and, some of the greats that we all look up to. But I think in terms of things that I pick up relative of right now or who I'm enjoying right now changes a lot. And so I would
Sure.
say those are the two that I've kind of been looking at recently.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, no, and I would expect that it would be. Our values and ideals change and we evolve, and obviously the people that we're looking at are going to evolve too. So I get it. So Annabelle, if our audience wants to follow you, keep, just stay in touch with what you've got going on. Is there any particular place you'd like us to send them? A social place or website,
Yeah,
or where would you like?
I'm on Instagram.
Okay.
My Instagram is Anabelle Cinch.
Got it.
That's CHINCH.
Okay. Perfect. We'll make sure when we get the show notes together, we'll get that in there so they know they can follow you and stuff. Keep up with what
Okay,
you've got going on. See what all creative thing aspects you have out into the world. So it's
great.
awesome. So thank
Amazing.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
This has been
you.
fun. I'm glad. I could have sat and asked you a whole bunch more, but I know you got places you got to be, and so
I
maybe
know.
another time we'll have to do a follow up to see what else you've created
Yes.
the next time. But thank you for your wisdom and your knowledge and for sharing your journey with us. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks for having me
Awesome.
on. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. And then, of course, to our guests, we love you. Thank you. We hope you found this episode both inspiring and informative. And if you did, you know what to do. All the things like, share, subscribe, and comment so we can share all of this or continue sharing all this fabulous content with you. And as I always say, in order to live the extraordinary, you must start, and every start begins with a decision. You guys take care, be safe, be kind to one another, and we will see you next time.